You must sacrifice to gain. Jesus says it in another place where he says, he who seeks to gain his own life will lose his life. But he who loses his life for my sake will actually gain life. What is Jesus referring to there? He's saying basically what is set before you. This is one of the best ways I think we can really understand the big broad stroke, and then we're going to dive into a little bit of things, which is this. What is set before you is this. You're here in life. You can choose your way of life, and it's YOLO. You only live once. You can choose your way. You can. He gives you the freedom to choose that. And you get to live life however you deem fit. Do whatever it is you want to do in life, go for it. But when you die, it is over. Or you can take this life, give it back to him. He'll show you what it was intended for in the first place, and then you will learn how to live forever. That is basically what's set before us through our spiritual walks in our life with Christ. Simple enough in that way. Now, there's all kinds of other nuances you could talk about, what that means, what that looks like, but that's the breadth, is basically you can live this life singularly once and do it your way. Choose the things that you want to do in the ways you want to do it, or you can take that life, submit it back to God and say, well, you made me, you really know how I'm supposed to be, what I'm supposed to be doing, so you tell me what's important, you tell me, and then that teaches you how to live forever. Because if we can't lay down our will now, what makes us think we will in eternity? That's the whole idea. Now, if you wanted to say, well, once we're there and we see God and like, boom, then we won't, you ask Adam. Or rather, you can't because he's dead. He was with God, make no mistake, and he still chose otherwise. I've always found it interesting. This is just a fun little side note. Someone can submit this as another question. Like, what makes us think that all decision is gone once you get into the next phase of this eternal life, that like now, just boom, you would still have to be choosing to stay in God's kingdom or not. The choice of the tree of knowledge of good and evil is still going to be there. Because if that was God's original intent, so we always have this idea of like, when you die, that's the final marker, and then you just never have to worry about it again. No, make no mistake about it. You're going to be in the same place where you still have to choose. So that's why God says, you better learn to choose now, because either way, you're going to end up dead. I know we don't like it this way, but this is what Jesus says, nonetheless. So he says this, pick up my cross. Now, first off, I want to say that's in Matthew 16. Luke has it as well. They basically get to the same thing. I want to point this out, that Jesus says this before he has been crucified, which means he's already telling people in a figurative and quite literal sense, like, I'm going to be crucified. So to follow me, you're going to have to pick up your metaphorical cross. I got a real one. So he's telling them in advance, which always boggles the mind when you think about the disciples like 6 chapters later. You're not going to die. He's like, guys, I've been telling you this for a long time. You're not listening. I always find funny because I find myself being that exact same disciple. Now, you could go all over Scripture that talks about this idea of to die to yourself, seek to gain your life, you lose it, the wages of sin is death. You could go through all of these ideas of it, but let's talk about the cross for a quick second in the first century, which is when Jesus was. The cross was, and really still makes it up there as one of the top ways that is the most gruesome and humiliating ways to die. Think about it. The cross meant one thing. If you were carrying a cross, death is coming very soon. Like the only people that carried crosses were the people that were about to be hung on them. Can you imagine how humiliating that is? Like, you're a criminal, by the way. That was the primary thing. Anyone who rebelled against the Romans and was criminals, whether they be thieves or anything like that, or just simply their enemies. There's one account of Rome crucifying 6,000 people in one day. They took 6,000 people and crucified them all. They were their enemy, that's why. But Romans loved crucifixion. It was pretty common in the day of the way they like to discipline and get rid of people. And here's how they did it. You're a criminal, and we've told you basically you're going to die. But what we do is we give you the cross, and we say, now you're going to carry the instrument that we're about to kill you with. You're going to carry it. quite literally, willingly having to. You don't want to, but they're going to make you do it and carry your own death, the thing that's about to kill you. You've got to carry it all the way to the place. As the city is all standing around watching, and as we very well know in the Roman Empire, they loved their gruesome deaths, so they were excited about your death. They were cheering it on. They couldn't wait to watch you suffer. This is the modern understanding of the day. Right? So now let's see what Jesus is really saying. He's not just saying self-denial. He's saying people are going to want to watch you suffer, and you're going to have to willingly carry out your suffering yourself. You're going to have to do it, and the whole world will cheer it on, wanting and waiting on you to fail. They're going to like it. When they see you suffering, and again, this is for Christ's sake, they're going to be the I told you so's. They're going to be like, I told you it was crazy and it wouldn't work. Make no mistake, that's what Jesus is getting at. You will have to bear the humiliation. Why do you think Jesus has so much about not retaliating, so much about quiet life and keeping your mouth shut, and so much? Why do you think he says so much about it? He even says, the world will hate you for my sake. They will want you to suffer. I just found out today about a church. This is crazy if you think about it. It's a church in Atlanta, and they are doing great work in their community. Great work in there, lots of work in their community. They're in a kind of inner city area, very urban area. They are doing a ton of work. The church, in a matter of the last 6 months, has went from a small church like this. They were slightly bigger. They were like 200-300 people, to 6,000 people meeting in a building smaller than this in a residential area. So there's houses all around them. And the city has given them 30 days to shut down. They have to move. Now, mind you, they're in a low-income area. The area they're in to do the work they're trying to do, like there's no option for a building to do. They have 30 days. And the pastor stood up and basically said, we don't have the money to do it, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to pray for the city officials and all these people that want us to shut down. We're going to pray that God blesses them. We're going to pray this thing, and God's going to make this work. And we may have to shut down from here, but we will go meet in the parks. We will do whatever it takes to get it. I heard that apparently someone is working with them, about to procure them a $7 million building, and they're turning half of it into some kind of a halfway house thing to help the people of their community and stuff like that. It's pretty interesting, pretty crazy. But the guy is, you want to know the reason that these attacks are coming? Because I kind of was like, well, this guy, I wonder what's so, I mean, that's pretty cool. You don't hear stories like that. So I started listening to some of his messages. Granted, all very different style. It's Atlanta. It's a very different manner of speaking even. But the dude is preaching Jesus. Wholeheartedly, no strings attached. It is not about how good your life. He is doing what we are doing here and just simply saying, it is all or nothing. The world's attacking him. What do we, even in the church, because really the church largely is a part of the world, say, well, they should have been wiser and done this and done that. No, Jesus says they're going to attack you. They're going to want you to fail, and they're going to want to watch you suffer. Doesn't matter if you're doing good or not. To be a friend of God is to be an enemy of the world. That's what Scripture says. You can't be a friend with both. Now, I'd like to point out, like I said, you could go all over Scripture, but I just simply like to point out one other idea about this. That if that's what the cross means, and he says, pick up your cross and follow me, there is an aspect of self-denial that is you can't deny, one could say. But we have to ask ourselves, why is it that God wants this from us, right? Why is it? I can't help but go to my own children and disciplining them, teaching them, and guiding them. I'm sure all three of them, when they were younger, could not grasp in their minds for the life of them why mom and dad wanted them to learn to do chores and why mom and dad told them they couldn't play video games all day long. I am sure in every one of their minds, depending on when and how it was coming about, every time we asked them to do something that on the surface seemed like all we were doing was just trying to make their lives a living hell. We just didn't want them to have fun. We just didn't want them to do that because we just wanted them to do something different. I am sure all three of my children, on more than one occasions, probably have thought that. Mom and dad are just being mean because they just don't want me to have fun. They just don't want me to do blank. They just don't want me to do blank, right? But as they're getting older, all three of my children are getting much wiser, and they're understanding that, hey, guess what? There's not actually a single time that mom and dad have asked me to do something and trying to teach me that it had anything actually to do with my enjoyment of it. It had to do with my growth to be able to have full enjoyment. Discipline is freedom. Discipline is freedom. You cannot be free without discipline. Matter of fact, discipline causes freedom. Why? I'll use an example. With my children, the things that I've taught them to discipline them have afforded them a pattern of life that now opens up more opportunities for them to do because they have learned to execute and do on certain things that must be done. What it actually does is creates a space and an area and a way that we can enjoy things. I'll use a really random example like dusting. Well, dusting keeps you healthy. And so they don't even know how much more sick they would be if we never dusted our house. And that discipline creates freedom. Freedom of what? They're not sick as often. And so because they're not sick as often, they get to do more things. But yes, if we never dusted our house, they could probably be sick frequently more. I mean, unless you're Taryn and you're just allergic to life. Or how about this? We have a projector in our theater room. If we don't dust, do you know what happens to a projector with a lot of dust? It sucks air right into it and it will blow the bulb, and those bulbs are super expensive. Guess what we would not be able to do? Watch movies. So a discipline that seems completely disconnected from another enjoyment, actually by doing it creates the very thing you really want, but you must do the discipline, so discipline creates the freedom. Now that doesn't just apply to all of you students, that applies to all of us as adults as well. The discipline creates the freedom. One of the stupidest things I've ever heard people say is, I wish I owned my own business and da-da-da-da, because then I could do whatever I want. Anyone who owns their own business knows the actual truth of the matter is, by running your own business, you don't get to do anything you want. You are tied to more things than you were tied to before, because you don't get to clock out. No one in their right mind asks to be a pastor. No one says they want to be this. Anyone who does say that doesn't know what it costs. And they may not actually even be going into pastoralship. They may just be going into you get to be a public speaker or something. So discipline creates freedom. And so it's not that God has really any interest in us not enjoying it. It's actually he has such interest in you fulfilling the life that he wanted you to have, which is so joyful and free and everything else, that he tries to show you the discipline to create it. But yet we look at it the reverse, like a child. God just doesn't want us to have fun. You just got to deny yourself. And so then we look at the discipline as suffering instead of as freedom. And so then we try to escape the discipline like a child that tries to escape in the middle of the night and get our fun stuff over here on the side and have our freedom instead of submitting it all to God, and it creates real freedom. Just letting that settle on us. And make no mistake about it, I'm right here with you guys. I have not fully understood this submitting all to God and giving it all yet. I know where the bar is. I know the direction I'm headed. I'm just not quite there yet. But nor do I think I could never get there. And neither should you. I used this example with Gabby just a while ago. It would be stupid for me to say, I'm going to be heading to Dallas, or I am headed to Dallas, and you say, but you're not in Dallas yet. I know. But I do know where I am headed. That's about the equivalent when someone like myself in this case, or you talk to someone, they say, here's the bar, here's Christ, sacrifice, learn the disciplines, we gotta do this, and then you say, but you're not doing it. That's like saying, you're not in Dallas yet. Of course I'm not. But I know what direction I'm headed, much better than you going in circles. Discipline is freedom. It creates it. And so that's God's interest. And that's what Christ, when he says, pick up your cross and follow me, he means you're going to have to deny yourself a whole lot of things and discipline yourself in this to follow me. But in the following me is where your freedom is. And then Jesus takes it a step further. Let's go to Luke 9. This will be the only one that we read this evening. This is one of the, there's very little things that I've read of Jesus that I like off the surface. All of them feel like a little bit of discipline. But then I am finding freedom in it. So Luke chapter 9, all the way down at verse 57. We're going to read 57 through 62. Let's get a little bit of a picture. Jesus is running around. He's preaching. He's teaching. He's telling people he's the Messiah. Come, follow me. This is what's happening. And it says, as they're on the road now, right? So they're walking from another town to another town. As they're on the road, someone says, so who's someone? Not one of the 12 disciples. Somebody else says, someone that's walking along with them. That was very common in the day. If there was a rabbi, a teacher, or someone that had this wisdom with his disciples and he was walking, they would kind of walk and follow along with them. I know we can't think of anything like that, of a leisure day like that, because we pack out our schedule so much with nonsense, we can't even find time to find some good sense. But in those days, they did their job, they did their work, and they had time. That's why philosophy boomed in the first, second, and third centuries, all the way into the Dark Ages, where all of these things, Socrates, Plato, why? Because they understood how to balance life in a way of discipline that then created the space for this. And then all that discipline goes away because Rome falls, and then, so on and so forth. And then we decide that industrial revolution is a good idea, and now we live in more destruction and chaos than we would have before. That's just a little history lesson on the human psyche for you there. So in their day, it was not uncommon for a group of people to follow along and have conversations, kind of like a Q&A after, if you will. So Jesus, imagine he just gave a message. Maybe he did the Sermon on the Mount, or in Luke's version, on the plain. He wasn't on a mount. A plane, not an airplane, a plane, like a flat area. And so he just got finished, and some people are following along with him because they're asking him some questions, right? They're talking to him because they're interested in what he has to say. So they are following him in the very physical, real sense. And one of them says, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus says to him, foxes have their holes, birds have the air in their nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Interesting point. The word there, to lay head, is the word klino in the Greek. And in the word klino, that only appears a handful of times. And by a handful, I mean like maybe 6. And the other places that it is used is when Jesus is on the cross, he finishes and he says, it is finished, and he klinos his head. Just a fun little point for you there. So Jesus' response to this guy is, I'll follow wherever you go. He basically says what? My cross to bear is that I don't have a home. I don't have anywhere. I have nothing in this world. I don't even have somewhere to sleep at night. So you say, follow me wherever I go. That's where I'm headed. To another, he says. So now Jesus turns. So can you imagine? Come on, put yourself in that. You're walking down a road. Jesus is talking. They're just talking, sharing, and someone says, Jesus, I'm going to follow wherever he goes. He says, I don't even have a place to stay, so are you sure you're going to follow him where he goes? Now we get to another person. Jesus turns, someone else, follow me. What does that probably mean, guys? Come on, use context clues. That dude was like, whoa, no house? I thought we were going to go back to the city, and maybe you're going to rent an apartment. And so that guy disappears. But then Jesus turns to someone and says, follow me. Turns to another guy. Hey, follow me then. Come on. Now, they all knew what he was doing. He wasn't talking about physically because they're already walking together. He's saying, no, give your life. What? Pick up your cross. Follow me. And what does this guy say? Lord, let me first go and bury my father. And Jesus says, leave the dead to bury the dead. But as for you, go and proclaim the kingdom of God. Let's take this quite literally, because this is not figurative here. Jesus is walking, and someone says, and Jesus says, follow me. And their response is, okay, I will, but first let me go. I got a funeral to go attend first for my dad. I got to go handle my dad's funeral. And Jesus' response is, let dead people bury dead people. You go right now and do what I said. In a very literal sense, and a very figurative as well. Dead burying the dead, basically, Jesus was saying, your father is physically dead. All the other people that are back at the city, they're all spiritually dead. So let the spiritually dead people handle the other dead people, because you have been alive, because I just asked you to follow me. The call has been given, so come and follow. Now what happens? He apparently doesn't. Why? Because now another conversation has happened. And now another says, someone else pipes up and says, I will follow you, Lord, but let me first go say bye to my family. I'm ready to go with you to the next town and devote my life to you. Just pause for a minute. Let me go do something else first. Let me go tell my family bye. Let me go tell everybody bye. Let them know what I'm doing so they don't worry. Let me go handle that. Seems reasonable, doesn't it? Seems logical. And Jesus says, anyone who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is not fit for the kingdom of God. Putting your hands to the plow is the representation of following Christ, saying, all right, I'm going to do the work of the kingdom. I'm going to do it. But what? Looks back, saying, well, there's a life back there that I had that I want. I either want to say bye to, I want to get detached from it. I need closure from that. And then I'll start the work. And what is Jesus' response? You're right, go do that. Have you one last hurrah, whatever, right? Go back, tell them bye, enjoy it for a moment. Then come follow me. And Jesus says, you're unfit. I know, and people call me harsh. Unfit. Unfit for the kingdom. Do you know what the word fit is? To be fit is to be useful. Unfit, useless. Jesus' response to someone, in all three of these instances, his response is saying, here's the cost, you better count it. The guy, nah. One guy, he says, follow me, and he says, I gotta go handle some personal issues first. I gotta get some things right in my life first. And Jesus says, no, go now, do it now, right now. And then another says, I'm gonna follow you, but let me go, handle some things at home, tell people bye. And Jesus says, you're useless for the kingdom. Jesus seems to think anytime you have an excuse other than yes, you're useless to the kingdom of God. Which means the gospel has not gripped your heart, which means you're not carrying your cross. Now, I didn't say this, guys. Jesus said it. It is not what you will hear on a Sunday morning. It is not what you will hear at most other quote-unquote churches. It is not what you will hear because it doesn't attract people, does it? To say, die to yourself, get rid of it all. Matter of fact, even if you have I'll get that together later, let me get this handled and that handled, then I'll commit. Christ says, no. I use this example with a young man, and I've said it a couple times recently. I believe it was the Spirit of God that gave it to me in that moment because I'd never thought of it this way, and it makes so much more sense. That is the equivalent of saying, all right, let's use Jade and Gabby since they're dating in here and what have you. I was going to use Daniel and Arena if they were here, but we'll use Jade and Gabby. And let's use a very unlikely scenario of Jade dating Sonia. We're going to use a very goofy scenario, okay? You know, that's how gossip gets started. If I use someone else, you know, like Arena, then all of a sudden now we got, you know, yeah, see? So Gabby's like, hey, I want to date. I want to get married. I want to do this. And Jade's like, okay, but I'm going to go see what it's like to date Sonia or to date this other girl or, who's another friend of y'all's that I know? Riley, that's the only one I know recently. Riley, right? Friend of theirs. Like, okay, Gabby, like, I'm totally about you, but first let me go. I'm going to date Riley for a bit. Like, we're going to see if it works out. Like, and when that, I mean, it may crash and burn, and it's probably going to, but I just want to give it a ride. Let me go do that first, and then I'll come. Now, what would any self-respecting person do in that scenario? You know what? I'm not even angry at you. Get out of my sight. I don't even want to talk to you anymore. Wouldn't we? Notice I said any self-respecting. Well, God knows who he is. He knows his worth and value. The question is, do we? That's the equivalent. That's what we have set before us. Let's put it in an adult sense is you ask somebody, say, hey, let's get married. And they say, okay. You say, but first, before we get married, I'm going to marry this other person first real quick. We're going to see if it works out. If it works out, thanks anyways, but I got you on the back burner. If it doesn't work out, then we'll come and get married. Lunacy. That would also be like going to a job interview, and you go to accept the job interview, and you say, but, okay, yeah, I accept, but first, I'm going to accept this other job. Like, hold the job for me, but I'm going to go work at this other place for a little bit first. And what do you likely say to them when they say that? You say, no, thank you. This is what Jesus says before us. He says, this is what life with Christ, this is what carrying your cross is. Now, in a practical sense, what does that look like today? We even use the term, oh, it's my cross to bear. And what do we typically mean? Like an ailment. We joke around, oh, they're my cross to bear, like a person. No. The cross to bear, yes, it's our own mind, will, emotions, and we paint it broadly, and that's nice. But the cross to bear is to say that my life is not my own. Dietrich Bonhoeffer puts it beautifully when he says, to become a Christ follower is to no longer have any direct relationship with the world and anything in it. Which means I used to have a direct relationship with Mike before I was a Christ follower, which I didn't know him actually, but let's just use that as an example. Mike's my friend. I have a relationship with Mike as a friend, and what's that relationship between me and Mike? As a Christ follower, no. Even my friendship with Mike, Jesus stands in between it, and he tells me what that looks like. He gets to determine how that relationship goes. The depth of it, the breadth of it, how long it will be, the way we interact, what we interact over, Jesus stands in between us. My marriage is not me and Taryn. Jesus stands in the middle of Taryn and I and is our arbiter and is our mediator between the two of us. Not like, oh, because they're arguing. I can't even perceive Taryn without Christ telling me how to perceive her. Now remember that bar? Because if she was here right now, she'd say, oh yeah? And rightfully so, because I know I'm heading to Dallas. Have I got that far yet? No. Not yet. But I can tell you 3 years ago, 10 years ago, I'm doing it much more frequently and much better than I was then. Matter of fact, my 3 children that are in this room, I am not their father directly. Jesus stands between me and Ann, and he tells me, shows me, instructs me, and gets to decide how I will be a father to her. Now, she could probably tell you, have I done that perfectly? No, I know I've stepped outside. But you know what the interesting thing is? Less in that relationship than I have in my own marriage, because doing it in the marriage way taught me how to do it in the child way. So on and so forth is the domino effect. But matter of fact, it's not just with people that Jesus has to stand in between it. It's with the world itself, which means I don't even interact. Let's use the one that we do the most frequently. I don't even interact with this iPad. I have no direct relationship with technology. Christ stands between me and technology and tells me how to use it. The frequency, the mannerisms, everything. Matter of fact, the clothes that we wear, I've never even thought of it this way. The clothes that we wear, Christ must stand between us and the decisions we make on that. Now you may say, Jared, now that's a little weird. What do you think about that? I'll give you an example. Can we? We're all family, yes? I'm enjoying this. You don't seem to be. It's getting a little too close to home, I guess. Isn't it interesting? Think about this just for a minute. Can you do this with me? Think about this. We see a movie star wearing tennis shoes that cost $5,000 or a dress that's $38,000 some odd dollars, and they're more than that because, you can go to North Park Mall and see a purse that's $30,000. So, and we look at it and we may think, well, that's stupid, but we look at it and we're like, oh, did you see, right? But you see a pastor wearing some sneakers that cost $1,500. What do we all do? Why? Have y'all ever thought about why we have a problem with that? For instance, let's hit the big one. Millionaires and businessmen owning airplanes, we don't care. But a pastor owns his own $30 million airplane, we all have a problem with it, and rightfully so. Why? Because even if we don't really understand it, we know that there's somehow a misuse of funds for those clothes. And whether we know it or not, what we're actually asking for is, I don't think that's how Jesus would have managed his clothing articles. It doesn't seem like you let Jesus be the mediator between you and that and said, was that a wise use of your funds? Y'all know that out of all the pairs of pants I have now, I haven't bought any of them now. One pair, actually. Mike Warner, actually, he was like, I ain't that skinny anymore. He's like, I'll give you the next pair. I'm like, I hope not to keep going. Let's stay right here in my sizes. No. Now, again, I'm not praising myself, okay? I'm just using it as an example, okay, right? Y'all get what I'm saying? Are there things in my life that Christ is not standing as the mediator in? Yes. But the marker of a Christ follower is not the behavior, like I said at the beginning, if you remember. It's not that. It is actually that as soon as he points it out to me, you shift. And so Christ being the mediator, standing between us and everything in the world, our clothing, yes, stands between us, determines how, when, how much, how it should be. Our sex life, Christ is the mediator. He stands between it. I'm about to wreck somebody's world. Actually, celibacy for certain periods of time in a marriage is a good idea. Scripture actually says you should take time and purposefully married and remove sex off the table for a period of time in your relationship. If you read the whole thing, the reasoning why, it says because then the relationship starts to be two between you and what you get out of it instead of Christ standing as a mediator. He doesn't say it in those exact terms, but that's what he's getting at. As a student before marriage, why does God say he's not just trying to do something to make us punished or anything. He's saying, I got to stand between it and do it the way I say to do it because then you're going to understand what life's really about. If you do it outside of that, it causes issues. Not just pregnancy or things like that. So our sexuality even gets submitted. Shall I keep going? Our money, it gets submitted. You don't have a direct relationship with money. Food gets submitted. You don't have a direct relationship with food. Now, I know for many of us, it just seems like Jared has lost his ever-loving mind. Are you saying there's foods we shouldn't eat and this and that and the other? Like we got to go kosher like the Hebrew people? Yes. No. But I have no more direct relationship with anything in this world. Christ stands in the middle and he mediates to me how I'm supposed to relate to this thing and how it's supposed to be used, appropriated, how much, how little, what kinds, all of it. That's our Dallas, that's our direction. And the marker of someone who is in the will of God is someone who constantly says, God, how do you want me to do this? Now, let me give you a few more examples because I know some of you are struggling with this. What does it look like with food or drink, let's just say? How is it? Let's just hit the nail on the head with this one. How is it? I'll use an example for each. We'll use food first. Could amounts be an issue? Sure, absolutely. This world has that problem. But it also could be stewardship of going out to eat and how much you spend on it. There's a restaurant Taryn and I go to once every 5 years because it takes us that long to save up to go there. It's a grand experience. It was something someone bought for us, and we like to try to recreate it. 5-year anniversary, 10-year anniversary. We've been a couple other times because someone has paid for us to go. It's an expensive restaurant. It's not somewhere I'm going to take any more than 2 people. But you know what I could do? Taryn and I could go there and have the kids just eat macaroni and cheese. And while they would probably be somewhat happy with that, they wouldn't if they saw the giant steak and lobster tail I got to eat. So God tells me, Christ stands in the mediator. Make no mistake about it, that kind of wisdom to put your kids first and that is Christ. There is no good outside of God. So even if you have a general proclivity to make a good decision, that is just an area in which you've already allowed him to stand in the middle that you didn't realize it. How about drink? How can it be that for some, drinking alcohol is 100% issue, sin, it's not going to work out for you? How can it be for one that, because it consumes you, but yet another it doesn't make a difference? How can it be that way? Because Christ stands as the mediator between you and everything. He directs you. Money, job, assets, so on and so forth. And so the crazy thing is, y'all ready for this? Are y'all listening? Because this is fun. I'm having a blast. The interesting thing is this. If you look at it this way, are y'all understanding what it means? And then you look at the Old Testament and all of the weird things that it seems like God was asking of the Hebrew people. Don't eat things with cloven hooves. Don't do this. Don't do that. You got to wash yourself 5 times before you. All of those weird, like we look at them and say, what is happening here? God is just weird. Makes no sense why they can't eat this and have to eat this in 7 days. Don't do that. What was it? Jesus says, I came to fulfill the law. What? All of that was given. Israel was supposed to be an example. All of those were given simply as an example. And if you read it, all over the Old Testament, it says, for all the other nations to understand what it means to do what? To put God as the mediator, Christ, the fullness of God on earth. They were supposed to be the example. What were they not? The example, just like Adam was not. So pray do tell, what is the church? The example. The modern day example of what it means to submit our lives to God. And so there were these weird, odd things that in the Old Testament that the rest of the world partook in that the Israelites were supposed to not. They thought they were earning their righteousness by doing what God said to do. And then God says, you've missed the entire point of what this is. And so as Christ comes, he shows. How does he show it? He breaks some of those laws of don't eat this, don't eat that. He does all those the wrong way, but then he takes them and flips them on his head and shows what generosity looks like and shows what the life fullness of those things were supposed to be. And then he asks us to say, now, will you do it as well? Will you pick up your cross and follow me? Will you submit everything of who you are for everything of who he is? And so these 3 guys, Jesus asks one of them, will you follow? The other 2 ask to follow. And I find in our world today, we are more like the ones that have asked to follow Jesus. And he's telling us what the cost is, and we're acting as if we don't hear it. The call has been sent out. You can't unring a bell. We live in an area of the world in which everyone has heard of Christ. Maybe not in the best of ways. Sure, we could sit and argue all that all day long, but nonetheless, the reason you are even sitting here is because you've heard that call, and to some degree, you are saying, I will follow. But Christ is saying, then let me be the mediator between everything in your life. But we cannot respond to him and say, let me get this in order first, let me do this first, then I will. We have to say, if you take it all today, I give it all today. Another story comes to mind of Abraham and Isaac. Give it all. And he doesn't say, give it all so you can have a great life. He says, give it all and you may have to be humiliated the rest of your life. Here's a way to know if we're actually ready to follow Christ, and it simultaneously shows us what actually has a hold of us. Are you ready for this? It's a real life example. I want you to do this as a practice, like over the next 3 or 4 days. Spend a moment or two, right before you go to bed, turn off the TV, something. Spend just like 10 minutes thinking about this, asking yourself these questions and using everything in your life as the sounding board. If God said to give up blank for the rest of my life, would I do it? Yes or no? Now, the hardest part is you're going to say, yes, I would, if he asked. And the hardest one for you to even think about the yes, that's the one that has the most hold on you. So what it does actually shows us how ready are we to follow Christ, but it also shows us what actually has got a hold of our hearts. So do it. Sit in your bed, sit in your living room, wherever, sit in your truck, vehicle, and just ask yourself that question and say, if he said the thing that I must give up and be humiliated, if he said give up house, you will have to be like him, homeless. Mind you, it was not that Jesus couldn't have a house. Guys, he had a mom that lived in Nazareth. She was not homeless. He could have went anywhere. Peter, they go to his mother-in-law's, to his house where his mother-in-law lives, so Peter had a house. They could have just, every day, just went back to Peter's house and just done right around there. He could have had a house. Not only that, by all accounts, we know that Jesus was a carpenter. He was not shy of work. He could have worked and did it, but he had no house by choice. So if he said, a house. Now, nor am I saying, guys, all of you right now, everybody just go start being bums on the side of the street. I am not saying that. Keep that in mind. But if he said, that's what it is. What if he said, your relationship with technology is destroying you? You have no control over it. It controls you. Pull a Jared, get a flip phone. I'm using it as a goofy example, but let's just say it. If it was something like that. What if it was, you have a poor relationship with TV? Get rid of all streaming service, no more. For the rest of your life, you never watch another movie. Many of us, that alone is like, what? That's crazy. God would never ask me to do that, but that just shows us how much. Now, am I saying movies are the devil? No, that's what they did 50 years ago. Because what were they trying to do? They saw, they had a good heart though, didn't they? They saw it was distracting the people of God from worshiping him and doing what he asked to do. So that, what did they do? They just decided, Old Testament, everyone. They didn't say, put Christ as the mediator. They just decided to mediate it for everyone. Yes, the one-eyed devil in the living room. But think about it just for a moment. And I want you to, every day, for a few minutes a day, write things like this down. If God said, no more, you don't get to watch a single movie the rest of your life. Yes, no. Be real with yourself about it. No home. Relationships with family. What if it was that God says, you got to give me those family members? Now, I'll tell you one family member he never says that, and that's spousal and your children. Never says to cut ties with them. If they choose to cut ties with you, that's a different thing. I have many family members that have cut ties with me. Write them down. Go down the list. I know this is hard. I know it seems like I'm coming at you like holier than thou. I'm right here with you. The only way I came up with these lists was because this is what God was showing me. And you know what surprised me the most? It's freaking movies. I don't even watch that much TV. But all my mind went to was, but I like Middle Earth. And half the time when I'm watching Middle Earth, I'm thinking about how that was like Christ and God. It's a good thing, God. He said, but what if I said no more because I've got something for you to do? See, because in my personal life, I keep saying, God, I want to do what you want me to do. And I listen and I look at these guys, not from the modern day so much, but in 100 years ago, 200 years ago, and I'm like, God, they were impactful for your kingdom, God. I want to be impactful for your kingdom. I don't really care this is my own heart prayer. I'm telling you the truth. I can sound all holy or whatever. I don't care. But it's like, I don't even care if I'm known like they're known. I just want to be able to look and say, my life did something. He says, well, then look at what they were doing. Charles Spurgeon is someone that comes to mind. If you don't know who he is, you can research it. He's called the Prince of Pastors. He pastored in the 1800s, 6,000 people and knew all of them by name, had books upon books of their names, their lives, and he met with each one of them every 30 days. That's 6,000 meetings every 30 days. I have no clue how he did that, except for when you read some of his things, he had no life. Or he had real life. He took one day out of the week. He spent it with his family up until time for church on Wednesday nights. He practiced very similar to the ancient Christians of Wednesdays. The rest of his time, he wrote 150 books and died at like 56 years old. How do you do that? To this day, that church is still standing and is still the central piece of London and does more work in London for the homeless and help the needy than any other church, still, hundreds of years later. But why? Gave up everything. There was nothing that Christ didn't mediate. And so that's what Christ sets before us. Each one of us has many, many things. The crazy thing is this, though. He's not trying, right? Just like the kids, he's not trying to say he just doesn't want you to enjoy life. He is just simply saying, let me mediate all of these things. Now intros a practice of fasting. What do you think it's for? To let you learn how to let Christ be the mediator. And by fasting things, you find out things that he says never again. And you find out things that really didn't have a hold on you. Are y'all seeing it? God is so brilliant. He put all of these things together. He didn't leave us out there and say, you better learn to give it all and you're just going to suffer. He says, I gave you tools to figure this out. I share this and then I shut up because I could do this all night. I'm going to use a different example of something that has ministered to me more than the individual knows. He happens to be sitting in the room, so I'm going to make him uncomfortable. Daniel. About, 3 months ago, 4 months ago maybe. You could correct me on the time frame. We were talking. We get together once a week. We try. We don't always do it every single week, but for the most part, we have. And about 4-ish months ago or so, I guess maybe it's 5 now because it is January's halfway through, but over halfway through. He was talking to me about the one thing Daniel talks about, jiu-jitsu. No, I'm just kidding. He talks about other things, but jiu-jitsu. I don't know if you'll even remember the first time we had this conversation. You mentioned it a few times. But he was talking about how basically, and I'm paraphrasing it so he can wave me down and say, that's not what I said if I say it wrong, but I'm pretty sure the context is right. If not, I've been living my life on a lie. No. But then he said, I was thinking about like going to prayer, doing this stuff, and I was trying to figure out basically how I can do both. And like, I'll go to prayer this night because there's not jiu-jitsu anyways. But he's like, but yet I felt like actually what I needed to do for a time is purposefully pick a day to, I think at the time it was just like go to prayer, come to church, like serve or something like that is what we were talking about. That is a night of jiu-jitsu, because is it really making me understand the value of this if it's just my free time anyways? Something to that degree. Is that fair to say how you kind of said it? And he didn't know it at the moment and probably doesn't know it until just now, how much that spoke to me of wisdom that he is gaining and understanding it and willingness to do it, but how much it spoke to me in my own life about how I try to take my schedule and what I want to happen in a week or a day and then fit God into it instead of saying, no, you know what, I'm going to purposefully take something that I enjoy and replace it with this thing. And what he doesn't know is that's what sparked my weekly discipline right now of solitude. That was sparked from him doing what God told him to do, sharing it. He is allowing Christ to be a mediator in that. And do y'all want to know a domino effect? Make no mistake about this. That little thing inspired me to do something, which inspired a few others to do something, which is a direct result, because I have been told this from the individuals and things, as to why this building is paid off. Looking at it directly, you could never see how any of those things are connected to any degree. They make no sense. But someone just allowing Christ to be a mediator in something that to all of us seems stupid caused the domino effect. Now, could you imagine if all of us were doing this? Matter of fact, actually, can you imagine when all of us are doing this? Because I know many of us in this room right now are already on that path. This is why we're accelerating, not because God decided to get up and do something, because we're responding. Make no mistake, though, the response will be beautiful. Discipline will be freedom. It will be joyous, along with agony. We will be humiliated. We will feel run down. But at the same time, there will be peace. I don't understand how it happens, but it does. Today, my heart is heavy. All morning, still is heavy. But yet, I was sitting on my back patio. And oddly, just as I couldn't tell you the exact moment, but it was like, I didn't even want to come tonight. And I was trying to debate. I was like, well, Taryn's sick, Mimi's sick. I got to take care of them. Kids are too good. I could just have Steph do it again. I'm going to be gone next week anyways. I know, I go through those things too, guys. And all of a sudden, throughout the day, there was just a peace that says, God says, do you really believe I got it? I got this. Keep doing it. The only way you're going to fail is if you quit. So keep letting me be the mediator. Because you didn't get this far in life, Jared, of your own accord. And he began to show me exactly what I just asked you to do. Taryn and I both know God gave me the house we are in so many ways that I couldn't even explain to you unless you got till about midnight tonight. But he said, at one point, you said you were willing to give it. You were ready to move into this church. My kids don't even know how real we were close to that. Can I tell y'all that? I'm going to tell y'all that because y'all need to. This is not a self-glorification. It is proving the goodness of God. When Taryn and I decided, we walked this before we started this remodel, and anyone who was here beforehand knows there used to be 4 offices upstairs. One you walked in on, and then 3 in a bathroom. We legitimately went and planned out how Mimi didn't live with us at the time, how we were about to move in because we knew the house is gone. Like we're doing what God said to do, and that means the bank is taking this sucker next month. So we came up here, we walked, we were like, hey, this little front office with the cool little glass that's currently, we were like, this could be the living room /church meeting. Like it would totally work. Just, all right, cool. The next room, well, that could be the boys' room. We'll just make them bunk up in there. It's fine. The next room, Ann gets her own room. And then me and you will have the back room. And we just have a good shower schedule. I mean, we have to share it with the rats at the time, but we'll figure it out. And that wasn't a joke, guys. We planned it. We measured rooms. That's how much we were like, this is what's going to happen. But now if greed gets a hold of you, you say, see, I'm going to do what God says do because then he's going to give me just like, in this case, it worked out that way. There are other things I could tell you in my life that God said, give it. I gave it. It's never come back, and it won't. I'm going to use my father as one more example. I know he wouldn't mind. I'll be here Sunday, so y'all can tattletale on me then if you would like. My father grew up always desiring horses and cattle and things. He had them younger. Always wanted it again. We got it. And it almost destroyed everything because it got a hold of him. Destroyed it all. I love horses. That's one of my things that God has just shown me. You're probably never getting that again, Jared. And so y'all like, oh, it's horses. You don't understand. That was you can ask Taryn. I loved my horses almost more than I did her until we got married. I slept outside in the stalls with my horses sometimes. Like, I know, I'm weird. Loved them. Almost destroyed this church, our family, everything. Lost it all, quite literally. They lost it to keep this building, actually. My parents were presented with a similar option that Taryn and I were. It just went the other way around for them. They had a house. We had almost 40 acres over off Stainback Road. And their option was the bank has taken one of these. We either get rid of this house and sell it in a short sell and make sure the church bills are taken care of, or we lose the building. They chose the building and went and lived in a shed for the next 5 years of their life. It almost destroyed them emotionally and everything, and I know my dad would not mind sharing this because he has shared this from this pulpit. Well, not this one, because he built this one for me, but from this location. Till he finally started doing what God said to do again. And as he was doing it there, you know what happened there? There was an opportunity to get horses. He did. Started distracting. You know what he had to do? And he didn't even sell them and be responsible. He just gave it all away. Land, house, saddles. Saddles are $3,000. I mean, he just gave it all away because he said, I can't touch this again because it's distracting me from the work of the kingdom. That's what it means to let Christ be the mediator. It's to say, for the sake of Christ, I will carry my cross. Whatever he asks of me today, if it's a lifelong thing, I get rid of it. It doesn't have a hold of me. I don't care if it's movies. I don't care if it's drink. I don't care if it's a clothing thing. I don't care if it's a time thing. I don't care if it's a house thing. I don't care. If he asks it of me, I'll give it, and I'll give it for the rest of my life. Anything he brings into my life and gives me, I will be grateful and gratitude for, but I will constantly, he may ask this of me today, and then he may say, I need another thing tomorrow, and I give it all. And my family is standing here. We talked about this actually as we were praying as a family. I'm just sharing this as a body. This is to encourage somebody in here right now. This is speaking prophetically, truly, in this regard, because we don't share these types of things about our family and things. But we stood here. I asked for, when we were praying for the tithe of each person, I asked my family to wait so we could pray together, and we did it over the communion. We prayed both together. Because God showed me something. He said, Jared, because where you are as a family right now is in my mind, it was I only knew of 5 generations, and we were the 6th. My kids are the 6th. But what I didn't know is Mimi said, actually, it's 7. My kids are the 7th generation of a family raised in the house of God, raised in ministry, and raised in the concepts of tithing. And the concept of tithing was just simply the means of this, because we've been living off that blessing for 7 generations. There's no one in that line, Mimi and I were talking about it a little bit more, that has ever wanted. Even when my great-grandfather was orphaned by his own father because he gambled it quite literally. This is back in the turn of the 1900s, 1910, I think is when it was. That was back when you could go gamble a debt and gamble your house. He had 6 kids. He was an alcoholic and a gambler to the nth degree, gambled his house away, and some guys show up and kick them all out of the house because they own the house now. Even when my great-grandfather as a child was kicked out of his own house, was he not provided for because his mother and those 6 kids all ended up going to an orphanage down the street. They lived in the orphanage and she worked. And because she worked, she got to stay at the orphanage with them, and they never went without a meal. See, do we think that that's a good thing? No, we look at it and say, it's so horrible. Yes, it's horrible. That was the choices of men, not allowing Christ to be the mediator. But as she, the woman, stayed true, she stayed paying tithes and all that time. There's letters and all kinds of things. My family has fortunately kept all of these things, which are beautiful. You can go back and look at writings where she was writing to her children that she could not even afford to take care of, but she still paid tithes and said the house of God comes first. Does that make any sense to you? And I stood together with my family and gave thanks over that because we stand here today because of their faithfulness. Now that happens to be with money. That's just because that's the thing that all of us really think about all the time. But it has to do with everything, allowing Christ to be the mediator. I will say it this way and bluntly, and this has been something that has came up a lot over the past 3 weeks, and I'm unsure why. Well, I know why, but if we allow Christ to be the mediator, this group of people, this generation, could break a curse of sexual immorality that has yet to be broken. Sexual immorality that has to do with outside the confines of marriage, and that has to do with the way that people use technology with pornography. We could, by letting Christ be the mediator of these things, we could break that curse. What is a curse? It's not whoosh, 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 I'm trying to think of a Harry Potter thing, hocus pocus thing. It's not that. A curse is simply the opposite of blessing. Blessing is empowerment to succeed. A curse is the empowerment to fail. So to break a curse is breaking something that is empowering failure. Sexual immorality, the reason God said to do it isn't because he's just trying to make rules. He says it empowers you to fail. Why? From the very real way of if you do it outside of a covenant marriage and you don't understand marriage and all that, you end up with kids that have one-parent homes or get divorced and everything. And what does it cause? It causes death and chaos. Now you're failing. Why pornography? What's the issue with that? It should be very simple. You're using an image bearer God to please you. You are making yourself God. These individuals that you are watching, this goes for all of you students and even adults that struggle with this. Think about this. You are taking an image bearer of God that was made for his pleasure and using them for your pleasure. You just made yourself God. That's why he says don't do it, because what? It empowers you for failure. Why does he say give the tithe? Because without it, it empowers you to fail in your entire view of your relationship with the world, because the world becomes your provider. You become your provider. So now what did you do? I am God because I must provide for me. Do you see how all of these things, with Christ as the mediator, this is how we pick up our cross. And if we take the words of Christ seriously, we start to reevaluate all of these aspects of our lives. Why is the church harped on some of them Why has the church harped on some rather than others? Is because usually the ones the church harps on are the ones that are the easiest to see. But usually the ones that are the easiest to see, like sexual immorality, like alcoholism, the ones that you can just see on the surface, the reason that those are the ones they attack because they can see them easier. But the ones that cause those bigger issues are all the way down at the smaller level. And all the way down at the root is the heart that says, Christ stands as my mediator in all things. That's what it means to be a Christ follower. And the one thing I can promise you is that's the bar. I am not there. But he hasn't quit on me, so I won't quit on him. And I ask all of you to continue to join me in that. In every aspect. Jesus took 12 people that were committed to doing this, and the world has never been the same. Not a single area of the world even functions the same way since that time in history. Why? Because a small group of people got it. To the nth degree, they got it. We can argue about, well, it changed the world, but the world's bad too. And yeah, because people stopped doing it. The church is the kingdom come when we become the body of Christ. So do that practice for the next few days. Spend 10 minutes every day just writing down what would it be? What would it be? then use fasting as that means to figure it out. Use practices that God has given. And if you're confused, you're like, hey, guys, Jared, I wrote down this thing, and I don't know any practice as to how to learn if this has got a hold of me or not. Fasting doesn't seem to fit. This doesn't seem to fit. I'll do my best. We'll go to the scriptures. I guarantee you there is a practice that helps us understand it as how to let Christ be the mediator. And guys, I promise you there's beauty in it.